I am Gabonde Wasebe Haji, Minister of Foreign Affairs for Elodium Moorish Pradium Ante Colorado. And our class tonight, or our acronym for Elodium Moorish Pradium Ante Colorado, is AMPAC. So you'll hear that a lot tonight. Our class tonight is on the law of restoration. You can see it here on the board as well as on the screen. The law of restoration, that's what we call our Constitution. Our motto is post liminium per consanguinity. Now we're going to go through all these terms. Okay? Tonight we're only going to go through the preamble, the dominions, and inalienable rights. That's what we're going to cover tonight. And we're going to go through a lot of definitions. You'll have a chance to read some definitions from my right, from what I have in my research. All of the definitions primarily come from Henry Campbell Black's Law Dictionary. And so those references will be there available. Somebody can read them for me as we go along. So I want to start with this that I have on the board, Law of Restoration, the AMPAC Constitution. In order for a state to be established, there has to be a constitution. So I have some boxes here. You know, we like to check boxes. AMPAC videos, you'll see boxes. You'll see people talking about checking the boxes. So check the boxes. You need to have a seal, a flag. Now, a name, that's sort of a given. Constitution, oath of allegiance, elections, and inauguration. Public inauguration. Okay, so these are the basic things that you need to establish a state in your dominions. So I know that people all over the country are going to be watching this, and so these are for your reference so that you know where to start, where you are, and where you need to go in the beginning of your development as a state. So let's begin. Let's go right into the law of restoration. And as you can see, we have our seal. And our seal is what we use for when we do documents and we seal the documents. We have a stamp and we stamp that seal. It's not in the multicolors, it's in red, but it's the same seal. And that's our official stamp, similar to a notary stamp that you'll see certain of the state provinces in the United States use. They have their own notaries, and they have a notary seal. That's our seal. Okay? Now, let's go through the preamble. Deputy Wazir, will you read the preamble?
We the Moors in Morocco, the mothers and sons of Northwest Amexem, Northwest Al-Kebulon, the North Gate, and standing on our 5 points of light, love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, in order to restore a balanced order, just protections, reciprocal wealth, and cultural integrity for ourselves and our just sanguine heirs, do establish this law of restoration for the organic state, Elodium Moorish Pradium Ante Colorado.
Okay, thank you. Now, the preamble is the most important part. It tells you your purpose, your mission, why you're here, who it's for, and what's being established. It's going through the whole process, giving you all the information that you need. So let's go through a couple of things in relationship to this preamble. Okay? Let's take a look at some of these definitions. You'll see the word balance. Let's go through this again. We the Moors in Morocco, the mothers and sons of Northwest Amexem, Northwest Al-Kebulon, the North Gate. These are all terms that are used for the lands that we're on, in the Western Hemisphere, the northern part of the Western Hemisphere. And standing on our 5 points of light, love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, in order to restore a balanced order. Let's take a look at the word balance, and that will give us more insight. Okay, the word balance.
Balance, An equality between the sum total of the two sides of an account, or the excess on either side. The conclusion or result of the debit and credit sides of an account. It implies mutual dealings and the existence of debt and credit without which there could be no balance. The amount remaining due from one person to another on a settlement of the accounts involving their mutual dealings. The difference between the two sides, debit and credit, of an account, often used in the sense of residue or remainder, and in a general sense may be defined as what remains or is left over.
Okay, so let's stop there. Now, balance has to do with, it's a financial term. When you're going for a balance, you're going for trying to find equality. Okay? And I didn't write it on the board, but we have a principle that comes right out of one of the treaties. It's called the triple principle. And it has to do with sovereignty and state. The second one has to do with integrity of dominions, and the third has to do with economic liberty without inequality. So when we talk about a balanced order, we're talking about balance in relationship to making sure there's mutual dealings, there's equality, there's balance in terms of access and resource to everything that the state has to offer. Okay. Let's go down to another definition. Balance of power.
In international law, balance of power, a distribution and an opposition of forces forming one system so that no state shall be in a position, either alone or united with others, to impose its will on any other state or interfere with its independence.
Okay. To form and establish a balanced order. So what we're doing is establishing a balanced order. Okay? What we've been finding is that as we go throughout our lives, many things get out of balance. Part of that has to do with not knowing who we are in relationship to the United States, the state of Colorado, other nations, other states, other municipalities, and we assume that we have a certain status, but yet if that status is not correct, there's an imbalance. So we want to create a balance so that we can have an equality in dealing with other jurisdictions. And it's very important. When they talk about state, they're also talking about jurisdiction. Okay? Now, a balanced order. Let's take a look at this word order. Deputy Wazir.
Order, a mandate, precept, a command or direction authoritatively given, a rule or regulation. The distinction between order and requisition is that the first is a mandatory act, the latter is a request.
Okay, go on.
An informal bill of exchange or letter of request, whereby the party to whom it is addressed is directed to pay or deliver to a person therein, named the whole or part of a fund or other property of the person making the order, and which is in the possession of the drawee. A designation of the person to whom a bill of exchange or negotiable promissory note is to be paid.
Okay, let's stop there. Let's stop there. Okay. Let's go back to the preamble and see how that works in. Okay. So we the Moors in Morocco. This is Morocco. Mothers and sons of Northwest Amexem, Northwest Al-Kabalan, the North Gate, and standing on our 5 points of light. Love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. In order to restore, that means bring back to its wholeness, a balanced order. Now, a balanced order, meaning that what we're doing is bringing order to chaos, bringing order to disarray, bringing order to what we've seen as disorder. Okay, and that's something that we haven't seen in our community, in the Moorish community. We haven't seen a lot of that in the world, but that's what we are striving to do. So in doing that, that order is not just the balance, it's also the complete association of power to bring that into force and into form. Okay, so let's go on. Just protections. Okay, let's talk about just protections. Now, when we say just protections, we're not talking about just protections. Okay, just something, just this. It's more than that. It's always more than that. Okay. Just.
Just, conforming to or consonant with what is legal or lawful, legally right, lawful. The words just and justly do not always mean just and justly in a moral sense, but they not unfrequently in their connection with other words in a sentence bear a very different signification. It is evident, however, that the word just in the statute requiring an affidavit for an attachment to state that plaintiff's claim is just means just in a moral sense, and from its isolation being made a separate subdivision of the section. It is intended to mean morally just in the most emphatic terms. The claim must be morally just as well as legally just in order to entitle a party to an attachment.
Okay, very good. So, just protections. So when we talk about just, we're talking about everything that has to do with justice. This is the precursor to justice. It's everything that is in the proper and natural sequence of the order of the state. The state brings justice. Individuals do not bring justice. An individual Moor cannot execute and enforce law. You see, the state enforces law on behalf of the Moor. Now, when we talk about just protection, it takes on a whole nother dimension, because the state exists to protect the rights of the people, to assure that the people have valid and sound foundations upon which to stand. So that's why we have this Constitution. That's why we've established AMPAC, our law of restoration. Let's take a look at the word protection.
Protection in English law, a writ by which the king might, by a special prerogative, privilege, or defendant from all personal and many real suits for 1 year at a time, and no longer in respect of his being engaged in his service out of the realm. In former times, the name protection was also given to a certificate given to a sailor to show that he was exempt from impressment into the Royal Navy. In mercantile law, the name of a document generally given by notaries public to sailors and other persons going abroad, in which it is certified that the bearer therein named is a citizen of the United States.
Okay, let's stop there. So, just protection. Protection is a form of writ. It is an execution of an order to provide protection for the issuer or for the parties that it was issued on behalf of. So when we talk about just protections, we're talking about consular court activity, we're talking about the consul general activity, we're talking about the mufti, we're talking about all of those mechanisms that are in place to provide just protections for the Moorish nationals that are part of AMPAC. Now, the thing about it is that because we are a state, we cannot step out of our jurisdiction to help Moors who are engaged in activities in relationship to another jurisdiction. Because if they're in relationship to another jurisdiction, and in the case of this landmass, that means that they are United States citizens. They are United States subjects and protégés. They don't come under AMPAC jurisdiction. So the object is to bring people to a higher level of an understanding so they can make a choice to consent to the fullness and the completeness of Moroccan law via AMPAC. Okay? So let's see what's next in here. Next we have reciprocal wealth. Reciprocal wealth. Okay. Now, as we said, our law of restoration, it shows everything that is in relationship to what we're about, our purpose, our mission, our guiding principles. It's the foundational principles behind everything we do. Reciprocal.
Reciprocal, concerning each of two or more people for mutual benefit, expressing mutual action or benefit.
Okay, so two or more people for mutual benefit. Very simple. Now, in relationship to our culture as Moors, in Moorish culture, there is reciprocity. There is the sharing of assets. There is the assurance that no one goes hungry. There's the assurance that no one goes without housing. All of these things are part of the assurances that come with this concept of reciprocal wealth. And so that's what we are building towards. Okay? Now, wealth. Let's take a look at wealth.
Wealth, all material objects capable of satisfying human wants, desires, or tastes, having a value in exchange, and upon which human labor has been expended. Example, which have by such labor been either reclaimed from nature, extracted or gathered from the earth or sea, manufactured from raw materials, improved, adopted, or cultivated.
Okay, go on.
The aggregate of all the things, whether material or immaterial, which contribute to comfort and enjoyment, which cannot be obtained without more or less labor, and which are objects of frequent barter and sale, is what we usually call wealth.
So, when you understand wealth, you understand that wealth comes from the land, the natural resources, and the people, and the labor and ingenuity of the people. So the wealth that's reciprocal comes from everybody, for everybody. And as we go through this law of restoration, you'll see how this Constitution facilitates that for all Moorish nationals and subjects who are part of AMPAC. Okay? So it's very, very profound. This document is unprecedented in history. There are aspects of this document that you will not see in any other constitutional construct in the world. Okay? And I can say that because I know that. Okay, let's take a look at what's next. Okay, the next one is cultural integrity. Now, cultural integrity is going to take on another dimension as we go into these definitions, because what people often think of as culture is different. You know, we think of culture as, people drumming and dancing, art expressions. We think of it as music, as painting, as acting, as all kinds of cultural activities of that sort. We think that that's the culture we're talking about. That's not what we're talking about. That's an extension of, that comes out of what we're going to talk about. Culture. Deputy.
Oh, the cultivation of the soil, tillage, the breeding of animals or growing of plants, especially to produce improved stock, social and intellectual formation, the totality of socially transmitted behavior patterns, arts, beliefs, instructions, and all other products of human work and thought characteristic of a community or population.
Okay. Now, if you notice, culture has to do with the soil. It has to do with the land. Any culture on the planet has a connection to the land. Their produce, their wealth, their survival is dependent on how they relate to the land. That's why in all cultures, that's why Taj Tariq Bey always says there's one culture on the planet. That culture is based on cosmological principles that cannot and will not ever be changed. Because the seasons come and the seasons go, they transition, and with each season there are things that need to be done to facilitate the well-being of the people. Now, that's been translated and transmuted into religious expressions in order to keep that alive and keep the people motivated to do certain things in favor and to be in favor of the deity, so to speak. But all of that is based on the culture. When you look at Moorish culture, it's the same thing. our astronomical wisdom and knowledge guided civilization for thousands of years. This is why our Independence Day, our beginning, our inception day, is February 2nd. February 2nd is a high holy day. Okay? Now I'm going to take a little tangent here, so you want to take some notes because it's not written on the board, it's not going to be on the screen. There are eight holy days in a year. 4 of them are high holy days. February 2nd is a high holy day. It is the middle of winter. It is the day to honor family and the bonding of family. It's a time to hone one's skills, to prepare for the next season, to make sure that the storehouses are taken care of and that the children are being taught properly and that things that need to be repaired can be repaired, and certain skills that need to be developed that can be developed in a cloistered area because you're dealing with winter. So that's the time to actually come together and develop those skills and cultivate your capacity to serve the community. The next holy day is the spring equinox. And that's usually March 20th, or late on the 20th, could be the 21st, early in the morning. Usually it's the 20th. That's important because, of course, that's the transition between winter and spring, which is also our new year, which is also the 21st, the next day, is our election day. So we're staying in alignment with our cosmological heritage. We're staying in alignment with the culture, cultural integrity. And then May 1st is the middle of spring. And that's the time for honoring the mother, the children, the mothering, the nurturing aspect of nature and of life. So May 1st is a high holy day. The next holy day is the summer solstice. And the summer solstice is the key. There are 2 pillars. Summer solstice and winter solstice, both of them holy days. And the summer solstice and the winter solstice come at times where the sun is reaching one is reaching its zenith and one is reaching its apex. Okay? So the summer solstice, the sun is reaching its zenith. It's at its farthest north point. And so the sun is brighter, we have longer days, warmer, hotter days, and so forth. Then the next one is August 1st, middle of summer. That's a high holy day. The high holy days are the middle of the season. And that high holy day, August 1st, is for harvest, the first harvest. The first harvest. So that's very important. All of this is cosmologically set. There are no accidents in the universe. Nothing's happening capriciously. So the next holy day is the autumn or the fall equinox, September 20th or 21st, depending on what the time it is or what time zone you're in. And that's usually when the last harvest might begin or end. It depends on where you are, what your latitude is and longitude is, and where you are on the planet, what the growing season is, and so forth. That's usually when that is. The next one, the high holy day, is November 1st. Now, November 1st is very key. I don't know what the name of that day is, but it doesn't matter. But there are things that are done by the adjacent society, the society that's tried to consume us and assume us, and they do certain other things around November 1st to obfuscate or to cloak the real value of what's happening cosmologically. We have Halloween on October 31st. And then you have on November 1st is All Saints Day. Okay? Now, All Saints Day is generally a Catholic holiday that's celebrated usually in your Latin, your Spanish-speaking countries, or Portuguese, depending if you're in Brazil. Now, on that day, there's the honoring of the ancestors. November 1st is for honoring the ancestors and the prophets. And then you have the next holy day is, of course, the winter solstice, December 20th or December 21st. Now, I'm not going to go any further than that because there's other things in between that give astronomical value and meaning to the things that we do. But all of these dates have value. And so that's the culture. And I share that because culture is in the soil. The soil is on the earth. The earth is in direct relationship to the sun. The sun is in direct relationship to the cosmos. And so the movement of those planets and stars and those constellations make up what we need and provide us with what we need to survive, to be vital, to be alive, to be productive. So culture. Now when we talk about cultural integrity, we're talking about being in alignment with that, being in step with that, having that as part of our modus operandi, our way of being in the world. Okay? Now, I have some other definitions here, and I'm not going to go deep into them, but they all relate to the same thing. Cultura, parcel or arable land. Agriculture, pertaining to or dealing with agriculture, also characterized by or engaged in farming as the leading pursuit. Agricultural product, things which have a status of their production upon the farm and which are brought into condition for uses of society by labor of those engaged in agricultural pursuits, as contradistinguished from manufacturing or other industrial pursuits. See, what happened during the Industrial Revolution, people were taken off the land and put into factories, unsafe conditions, using all kinds of unsafe elements and combination of chemicals. But that was manufacturing. It was considered progress. But it also took people away from their culture. So what's happened is for our people, our culture is in the land. When you study Moorish history, especially in Andalusia, what they call today Spain, and you read in the book, The Golden Age of the Moors, in that book they describe that there was, I think it was in Cordoba, they built a suburb of 100,000 homes using craftsmen and artisans. And everyone was being fed because of the work that was being done in the fields, through husbandry, through agricultural science, and also through animal husbandry, which is taking care of the cattle, the goats, chickens, all of those things which became food to feed the workforce, to feed the nation. You see, so they built wealth by creating all of this product out of the land. You see, it wasn't an industrial revolution, but it was an agricultural science that they engaged in to provide for everyone's well-being. Every civilization on the planet has to manage its agricultural product, or it falls apart. Literally falls apart. Okay? Let's take a look at integrity. Deputy
Integrity, as occasionally used in statutes prescribing the qualifications of public officers, trustees, etc. This term means soundness of moral principle and character as shown by one person dealing with others in the making and performance of contracts, and fidelity and honesty in the discharge of trusts. It is synonymous with probity, honesty, and uprightness.
Okay, wonderful. Now, cultural integrity, okay, has to do with contracts, right? Personal dealings with others, fidelity, honesty, the discharge of trust. Now, cultural integrity. Let me give you an example. An arranged marriage is an expression of cultural integrity. It's a contract. It's fidelity expected. It's dealings between persons. Discharge of trust. You see, marriage is a contract. See, we don't call it marriage. We call it matrimony. You see, in our culture, it was matrimonial union. Marriage is a Western construct where the state becomes the claimant of the issue from the couple. So whatever the couple produces, whether it's children, wealth, homes, whatever it is, the state has a right to that. You see? So cultural integrity, that's not cultural integrity. That's cultural usurpation. You see? So we're moving away from that. So we promote this idea of cultural integrity because we want our culture to be intact so that the people have some stability, so that the nation can be strong, so that we can further our purposes in claiming what is rightfully ours, which is the land, which is the North American land, specifically these dominions. And I will get into that in the next section. But let's go on in terms of the preamble. This is good stuff, isn't it? I like it. Okay. Cultural integrity for ourselves and our just sanguine heirs. Just sanguine heirs. Just sanguineous. Right of blood. Okay? Just soli. The law of the place of one's birth, as contrasted with just sanguineous. So, the United States of America, and the United States, uses just sanguine and just soli. Two concepts that you may not be familiar with. Just sanguine has to do with right of blood. Just soli has to do with where you were born. So they claim that if a United States citizen is outside of the jurisdiction of the United States and has a child, that mother that has that child is a United States citizen. Okay? In the United States jurisdiction, they go by the right of blood. What does that mean? That means what they're doing is they're defining the property. They're declaring and defining their property. Okay? Okay, now, let's take a look at air. This is not the air you breathe. This is the air you are. Okay? You ever heard somebody called an airhead? In this sense, everybody's an airhead because you're an heir to something. From your parents, from society, from family, from your extended family, from your own efforts. You have a right of claim. Okay? So let's take a look at this. Deputy.
Heir, at common law, the person appointed by law to succeed to the estate in case of intestacy, one who inherits property, whether real or personal. A person who succeeds by the rules of law to an estate in lands, tenements, or hereditaments upon the death of his ancestor by descent and right of relationship. He who is born or begotten in lawful wedlock and upon whom the law casts the inheritance immediately upon the death of his ancestor. One who would receive his estate under statute of descent and distribution. Moreover, the term is frequently used in a popular sense to designate a successor to property either by will or by law. The word must be construed according to testator's intention as gathered from whole will.
Okay, thank you. Now, an heir. When our parents passed, there were things that they left for us because we were the heirs to their estate. Okay? Now, in our community, that doesn't always happen. Why doesn't that always happen? Because our people are property of the state, and the state will extract from their people, I shouldn't name people, their persons, they extract from them as much as possible. So by the time that one of our people passes, there's not much left to pass on, in too many cases. In some cases there is, in other cases there is not. Okay, so, but those that are left in the living have right of claim to whatever was to be passed on to the heirs. Okay, now, just sanguine heirs. In AMPAC, all the Moors and Nationals are just sanguine heirs. We don't deal with just soli. We don't care where you were born. It's like, what's your bloodline? That's what makes you a Moor. Now, your political allegiance is another issue. We have a lot of Moors that are going around saying, I'm a Moor. I'm not black, colored, Negro, African American. I'm a Moor. I have rights. Okay, then the question is, what is your political allegiance? And if your political allegiance is not to a Moorish state, you're a United States subject. And all the rights you claim do not exist, except by blood. And there's a few that you can claim by blood, through just sanguine blood right. But then you have to learn how to do that, because there's no structure in place to help you facilitate that. Okay, unless you are a part of a state. Okay, so just sanguine heir. That's why, see, all of this is in our preamble. We worked this preamble diligently because it had to say a lot without saying a lot. It had to be complete without being overbearing. Okay? Now, do establish this law of restoration. The law of restoration. The law of restoration is key. The term restoration we use a lot. Restoration is a term that means to be restored, to be brought back to your original condition, to be, for you to reclaim what was yours, to be restored to your property, restored to your status, restored to your wealth, restored to your consciousness, restored to your culture. You see? So all of that is part of the law of restoration. That's the whole intent and purpose behind our law of restoration. The AMPAC Constitution, statehood, necessity. We've checked the boxes. Okay? The law of restoration. For the organic state, now let's take a look at that organic state. You don't always hear that. We don't think about statehood as Moors. We think about a temple, we think about an organization, we think about a group, we think about a club, we think about some other type of structure or organization. But we very seldom think about statehood when we think about being a Moor. So let's take a look at what organic state means. Okay. Organic and state.
Organic, of, pertaining to, or derived from living organisms, having properties associated with living organisms, of or constituting an integral part of something, fundamental, constitutional, structural. B, law, designating or pertaining to the fundamental laws and precepts of a government or organization.
Okay, so organic speaks of government. It speaks of people, living organisms. Okay? Now, here's a concept. The United States doesn't have any people. It has persons. Persons are defined as artificial entities. Ens legis. They have a nom de guerre on a birth certificate. You see? There's a cesta KV trust in that nom de jure that's used by the state to usurp wealth and resources from those parties' labor. You follow that? But people, living organisms, have inherent rights that you got and you had when you were born and can never be taken away. That's the organic state. So AMPAC is an organic state, okay? And these are the fundamental laws and precepts of our government. Okay, state.
State. Noun. A people permanently occupying a fixed territory, bound together by common law, habits, and custom, into one body politic, exercising, through the medium of an organized government, independent sovereignty and control over all persons and things within its boundaries, capable of making war and peace and of entering into international relations with other communities of the globe.
State. Excellent. So, as a state, permanently occupying a fixed territory, bound together by common law, habits, and custom, into one body politic. So, a body politic, AMPAC, is a body politic, okay? It's an organic state. Organized government, independent, sovereignty, control over all persons and things within its boundaries, capable of making war and peace and entering into international relations. That means the state has the capacity to manage its assets and to engage in commerce and international relations with whatever country or nation is willing to engage in that commerce. You see? So that's what a state becomes then the extended arm of the people. Now, all persons can mean corporations, persons can mean other entities and organizations, persons can mean many different things, but it does not mean people. Okay? So when we talk about an organic state, we have the people controlling an international entity, a state, that has the capacity to engage internationally with all other states, which gives the people much more access and greater capacity and ability to be engaged in the world, to carry out Noble Drew Ali's edict, to take our place among the affairs of men. So that's what we're doing. Okay, let's go to, So what's the name of this organic state? Allodium Moorish Pradium ante Colorado. Allodium means free, not beholding to any lord or sovereign. It means to be the highest, is the highest claim that can be had. A allodial claim of title is the highest title that can be had. And only the autochthonous, aboriginal, and indigenes or original people of the land can claim land allodial. Colonists cannot. They reside on the land. And to reside, to have residence, is always a temporary status. Always temporary. Okay, Moorish. Now we know that Moorish has a lot of different definitions, but I like the definition that Yafa Bey used. And she basically says that a Moor is any melanin-rich people throughout the world. So, allodium, free, not beholden to any lord, melanin-rich people. Pradium. Pradium means estate. That means the holding of land, the holder in due course. That means that having claimed the land in your own right. Allodium Moorish Pradium ante has nothing to do with ants, it has nothing to do with being against anything. It has to do with before ante, like antebellum or antecedent. It has to do with being before Colorado. So, free Moorish estates before Colorado. That's the name of our organic state. Okay? Now, let's go on to the next part, dominions.
Dominions. The dominions for Allodium, Moorish, Pradium, Ante, Colorado now include all land, air, and waterways within latitude 37 degrees north to 41 degrees north by longitude 102 degrees west to 109 degrees west. Our Earth dominions are 380 miles long east to west and 280 miles wide north to south, with the geographic center point being at latitude 38 degrees 59.9 feet north by longitude 105 degrees 38.5 feet west. The total area of land and waterways is 104,101 square miles, 103,730 square miles of land, and 371 square miles of water. The lowest point is 3,315 feet above sea level, known as Arkansas River, and the highest point is 4,440 feet above sea level, known as Mount Elbert. These are the dominions from the center of the earth through our divine footprint into the farthest reaches of the cosmos, upon which we thrive, through which we heal, and in which we are restored.
Okay, so that's our dominion. When you grasp the depth of that,
that's what I did.
And the import of that, this is a claim, and we've staked this claim. These are our dominions, and these are our dominions allodial. Because anybody else on the land or using the land that is not AMPAC is occupying the land and is a foreigner residing on our land. You see? We know that, and they know that. Okay? So let's take a look at the word dominions. With my cursor. There it is. Dominion. Go ahead.
Dominion, ownership or right to property, or perfect or complete property or ownership. Title to an article of property which arises from the power of disposition and the right of claiming it. Sovereignty or lordship, as the dominion of the seas. In the Civil War, with reference to the title to property which is transferred by sale of it, dominion is said to be either proximate or remote, the former being the kind of title vesting in the purchaser when he has acquired both the ownership and the possession of the article, the latter describing the nature of his title when he has legitimately acquired the ownership of a property but there has been no delivery.
Okay. So dominion, ownership or right to property, or perfect or complete property or ownership. Sovereignty or lordship. So being the lords of the land, we have the right of claim. Now, you may be saying, well, you know, how can you do this? Because, you know, who are you guys to do this? We did this based on various treaties, okay? We know that there's the Treaty of Peace and Friendship between the Sultan of Morocco and the United States of America, 1786, 87, 1836. There's also the Treaty of Madrid, right of protection in Morocco, 1880. That's key. And then there's also the Act of Algeciras in 1906. Okay? Now the last two had many different parties to the treaty. The first two were bilateral treaties between Morocco, the Empire, and the United States of America. Okay? Now, our dominions, when you look at these treaties and you look deep into them, and you look at subsequent documents as a result, you will find that they'll talk about the United States in Morocco. They even say that the United States is in Morocco. Okay? Now, so we know that this is Morocco. We know that this is our lands. We know that we are aboriginal, autochthonous, indigenous, indigenes, original to this land. We know this. And we know that they know this. They have to know this. They have to know it because they have to be able to work with it in order to try to maintain control of what they've established. And they have terms that they use for us that we don't know about because we didn't pay attention. We're called proteges and subjects of the United States. There's other terms. The terms that we already know, you can set those aside. They have nothing to do with law. So what's happening here, when we deal with our dominions, we're dealing with the land, the water, the resources, everything under the earth, and everything through the footprint. This is our Constitution. These are our dominions. And that's our footprint. So from the center of the earth, through this footprint, through the cosmos, that's our dominions. To infinity. Okay? That's our claim. Now, the next term in this, we talk about footprint. Footprint in the law of evidence. Impressions made upon earth, snow, or other surface by the feet of persons, or by the shoes, boots, or other covering of the feet. Now, in order for a footprint to be made, it had to be a living being. So in that definition, it should have said natural person. Because a person, an artificial entity, can't make a footprint. It's an impossibility. Okay? If you can put a piece of paper down there and you can step on it, but it's still the footprint of a living being, not whose name was on that paper. So what we're doing is making our footprint. We're claiming our place in this cosmos. Now, this is where we establish our culture, our cultural integrity. You go back to the preamble, and our cultural integrity is tied into the land. So we have the mountains, we have all the forests, we have the rivers, we have lakes, we have the plain, the eastern plains, we have the western slope, we have the Rocky Mountains, we have the St. Louis Mountains, or San Cristo Mountains, and all of that. We have Arkansas River, we have the North Platte, the Colorado River, even, what's that river that goes to the Gulf? The Rio Grande. All of it starts in Colorado, you see. These are our dominions. These are our resources. This is what we claim. And this is what we can begin to lay claim to, and those that are using it will have to begin to pay rent, tax, consumption tax, you see, deed tax. And these are not taxes we made up. It's in the Act of Algeciras. They actually say you have to have a certain position. Under the Sharifian authority, there is a position in place that has the right to assess deed taxes, consumption taxes, and also property transfer taxes, and the others. And it tells you what the percentage is. So we're not making this up. Following instructions. And who gave us the instructions? The Sultan. The treaties are with Morocco. The Morocco has set the stage for everything in the modern world in terms of political intercourse. The United Nations is based on those 4 treaties and other treaties with Great Britain and other of the Christian powers. But those are the main treaties. Treaty of Peace and Friendship, Treaty of Madrid, Act of Algeciras. You read the United Nations Charter, you will see some of the same verbiage from the Act of Algeciras in the United Nations Charter. So everything that we are claiming, we're not claiming because we just came up with this and said, I want, gotta have it. No, we looked and we discovered and found that, we have a right to claim this. And this is how we do it. We follow these steps. Our instructions are laid out for us. And then it stopped being rocket science. You know what I mean? Being a Moor is like rocket science. It's like, do I do this? Do I do that? And over here am I this? Over here am I this? What do I do? Oh my God, help me, save me. And that's what happens to us. We go through these conniptions, you see. Okay, let's go on. I can have fun with this too much and miss the point. Okay, now, inalienable rights. Now, this section is very, very important. In other constitutions, they don't have sections like this, or it's limited. We expanded on it. We expanded on it to try to include everything that we could conceive of immediately and then make room for others. Okay? So, inalienable rights. Deputy.
The inalienable rights. Every woman, man, and child, all mothers and sons, are born with certain inalienable and unalienable rights endowed by Allah, having nothing but its own rights expressed in and throughout its creation. These rights can never be taken away, diminished, altered, or levied by government, no contract, fraud, sufferance, nor under color of law can any unalienable right be removed from a national in allodium moris pretium ante Colorado. These rights include yet are not limited to.
We can stop there. Stop there.
She's ready to go.
Okay, I'll drink to that. Since you don't have anything right now. Okay. This is key. It's a very powerful statement. When we talk about inalienable rights, as Moors, we like to talk about we have rights. And we like to express our rights. And we want to explain our rights. We want to tell people, this is my right. And we want them to believe us. They don't have to believe us. Because if we're trying to explain it, and we're not in our proper status, I don't mean as a Moor, if we're not a national of a Moorish government like AMPAC, then the rights that we're saying that we're claiming don't exist because we're subjects and proteges of the United States. The rights that we talk about in this section of the Law of Restoration are for Moorish nationals to be protected in. This is not for United States citizens. So if a person is a Moorish American without political allegiance, we can't protect them in these rights because they're not part of a Moorish state, which means they don't come under the law of the Moroccan Empire. In chapter 2015 of the Treaty of Madrid, it says, you must choose between entire submission to the laws of Morocco. Now, between what? Between United States of America law or the entire submission to the laws of Morocco. Have Moors been doing that? No. So, entire submission to the laws of Morocco, Moorish law, AMPAC in the Moroccan Empire carries the Moroccan law in these dominions. That's where our rights are protected. So, every man, woman, and child, that means all Moors, all mothers and sons, are born with certain inalienable and unalienable rights. Let's take a look at what that means. Inalienable.
Number one.
Oh, wait a minute. No. You're gonna blow your throat out. Let's have somebody else read. Son.
Inalienable, not subject to alienation. The characteristic of those things which cannot be bought or sold or transferred from one person to another, such as rivers and public highways, and certain personal rights, example, liberty.
Okay, go ahead. The next one.
Unalienable, inalienable, incapable of being aliened, that is, sold and transferred.
Okay, so now we've heard these terms before: inalienable, unalienable. We've heard these terms, and we've always there's been this drive in us to be able to put ourselves in some kind of status, some situation where our rights are inalienable and unalienable. Nobody can come up and say, well, you don't have this right. We've been trying to find a way to do that. Well, we found a way to do that. Statehood. You see, checking the boxes. Law of restoration. AMPAC Constitution. We acceded to the treaties. To accede means we've adopted, accepted, and we've become parties to those treaties that we mentioned. We're parties to those treaties. We deposited those treaties, just like the instructions say, in the Act of Algeciras. We deposited, well, the depository in Madrid doesn't exist anymore. But in the United Nations, you deposit your accession, your agreement and consent to be a party to that treaty with the Secretary General of the United Nations. And it gets recorded in their treaty office of their legal department. And the parties are informed thereafter. So we're a party to those two treaties. So we can enforce the treaty, we can enforce our inalienable rights. Because those inalienable rights also are expressed, if nothing else, implied in those treaties and in all the other declarations, conventions, optional protocols, covenants that have come out since the United Nations began in 1945 that we have acceded to, and there's about 45 of them so far. So we've been a little bit busy. Okay, now the next part of this is rights endowed by Allah, having nothing but its own rights expressed in and throughout its creation. These rights can never be taken away, diminished, altered, or levied by government. Let's take we'll look at that word levied. Leviable. Go ahead. Dip.
Leviable, that which may be levied, that which is a proper or permissible subject for a levy, as a leviable interest in land.
Okay.
Levy, to assess, raise, execute, exact, collect, gather, take up, seize. Thus, to levy, assess, exact, raise, or collect a tax. To levy, raise, or set up a nuisance. To levy, acknowledge a fine. To levy, inaugurate war. To levy an execution. Example, to levy or collect a sum of money on an execution.
Okay, stop there. Now, levy. So you have inalienable and unalienable rights, which cannot be levied by government. What happens with your right to travel? In the United States jurisdiction, it's levied. It's levied. You have to pay for the driver's license. You got to pay registration on the automobile. You got to pay to get the emissions check. You probably, you have to pay insurance. Yeah. There's all kinds of levies that they attach to a right, an unalienable right.
You don't have a driver's license, you can't drive.
That's another issue.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing.
I'm not driving.
Even the Supreme Court of that jurisdiction says that you have the right to travel. and not be levied. You see? But the state municipal district organ of the United States engages in a racketeering process where they levy your right to travel and do it through licensing and fees and all kinds of assessments and all that kind of stuff. They even gas taxes is a levy on your right to travel. So it's a violation of a right that you have by fact of birth. And in all the treaties that we discussed, that we've mentioned, that right to travel is inviolable. Treaties long before that, between the British and some of our Aboriginal brothers and sisters, the right to travel was inviolable, could not be restricted. And those treaties are still in place. So, let's go on.
Levy.
No, I mean, I'm going to go on.
Oh. Sorry.
Okay. I know it's exciting. No contract, fraud, suffering, and any unalienable right be removed from a national and melodian Morse Praetor Monte Colorado. So, contract, fraud, sufferance, or color of law cannot be used to remove any of those rights. So you see how we've cut all that out from under? So the assumption is that the state cannot come in and deny you of your rights. All the state can do is protect your rights. You see? Now, let's take a look at contract, fraud, sufferance, and color of law, so we get some clarity on those. Okay. Contract. Now you can go.
Contract. A promissory agreement between two or more persons that creates, modifies, or destroys a legal relation. An agreement upon sufficient consideration to do or not to do a particular thing.
Okay, let's stop there. You get the idea of the contract. So what contracts have you signed where you relinquished your right? Everything. You put a signature on the driver's license. You sign the registration.
Sign the lease.
All of that. So in every signature in relationship to that particular right to travel issue, we call it a capitulation. Okay? Because you've been compelled. You see, United States and all of its subsidiaries are operating under what's called internationally capitulatory regime. Everything is done through getting the person's consent. So that person capitulates in order to get a benefit. You see? And so the object is to not capitulate. But if you say, I'm not going to capitulate, but what do you have to back you up? If you don't have a Moorish state, you don't have anything to back you up. Okay. Fraud.
An intentional perversion of truth for the purpose of conducing another in reliance upon it to part with some valuable thing belonging to him or to surrender a legal right. Okay,
that's good enough. We don't have to go through the whole thing. So you get the idea. So what fraud has been committed?
The fact that they have a president, they shouldn't even have a president right now.
Exactly.
There's all kinds of frauds. Their entire government's a fraud. It's a criminal corporation registered
Exactly.
in Australia.
IRS is a fraud.
Yeah.
Colorado Department of Revenue is another fraud.
Nobody has an income.
All of those are frauds. So because they're trying to, they're for the purpose, perversion of truth, for the purpose of inducing. Inducing is another way of saying getting you to capitulate. Another in reliance upon it to part with some valuable thing belonging to you or to surrender a legal right. Now, a legal right is
Your father's rights.
colorable. A legal right is colorable. Under legal, you have no rights. Only under law do you have rights. Okay? Now, let's take a look at this word sufferance.
Toleration, negative permission, by not forbidding, passive consent, license implied from the omission or neglect to enforce an adverse right.
Okay, so tolerance, sufferance. Now, sufferance we think of as, you know, people who protested and people who fought for certain rights and so forth. But this has to do with giving negative permission. It's not willful consent. It's like consent almost by adhesion. It's like you don't even know you're giving consent, but you gave it. You see? Because you're operating under and expecting toleration. And so you give consent expecting a benefit, and you give a passive consent, and in that consent you consent to a license.
Yeah.
And a license means the right to do something that otherwise would not be legal. So you're paying to exercise a right. You pay a license to do something. The paying of the license is the illegal act in itself.
Sufferance right there.
That's it.
Being a lawyer, all of it.
Yep. Color.
An appearance, semblance, or simulacrum, as distinguished from that which is real. A prima facie or apparent right, hence a deceptive appearance. A plausible assumed exterior, concealing a lack of reality, a disguise of pretext.
Okay. Okay. So color. So your rights cannot be taken away under color of law, under a guise, some kind of guiling activity, something to fool you, something to trick you into giving up your rights.
Deception.
Yeah, a deception. Okay? So this is all key to dealing with our inalienable rights. So under color of law under no contract, fraud, sufferance, nor under color of law can any unalienable right be removed from a national in a lodium mors pretium ante Colorado. And these rights include, yet are not limited to. Okay, we're gonna go pretty quickly through these. Hold on. We're not gonna read these. It's gonna take too long. Because then I have to go and talk about each one. Because I like talking.
And that's homework right there if you really wanted to be.
Yeah.
Breaking all of those down.
Go on the website, click on the Law of Restoration tab, and the Constitution will come up. You can study those.
And thank you for having the treaties up there. Every last one of those treaties up there on the site too.
Yeah.
That
Now,
really
for those
helps.
that are watching, if you can't click on it and the treaty doesn't come up, just copy and paste the URL, put it in your browser. It'll come up.
Oh.
Yes. Okay. Now, read this next part on rights.
Rights that we, the autochthonous, aboriginal, and indigenous people, Moors from the land, have by pedigree accrued throughout time immemorial, are hereby included in this, the law of restoration.
Okay. Now, you've heard me use the word autochthonous, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Autochthonous is a term which means coming from the land. It is a stronger term than aboriginal or indigenous, or even indigene or original. Autochthonous means that you and your ancestors came from the land. You didn't come here from someplace else. You came from the land. Now we know the Western Hemisphere is the hidden repository of humanity. It is the oldest repository of humanity. The oldest findings they've had is in the Yucatan. The highways and byways of the Western Hemisphere are all the rivers, lakes, streams. That was the travel system. You see, our ancient civilizations go back tens and hundreds of thousands of years ago. Okay, so we are the autochthonous people, aboriginal and indigenous people. Moors from the land have by pedigree Pedigree is that which comes to you by birth, that which comes to you from your parents. For instance, if your father was a world record sprinter, you might be able to run a little faster than the average person. Okay, and with a little practice, maybe more than that. You see, if well, nowadays they really promote basketball, so you have Bronny James and people like that who, you know, have pedigree. They have basketball pedigree in their bones, not just in their shoes.
Malcolm X's daughter.
In their bones, exactly. Malcolm X's daughter, Malcolm X's son. I mean, there's all grandson. There's all kinds of pedigree that you see unfolding around. So, accrue. To accrue is to accumulate. Through time immemorial. That means time that is out of mind. It's so vast. It's so vastly distant. It cannot be thought of. So when we say time immemorial, we're talking about from the beginning, ab initio, till today, and on. Okay? Are hereby included in this law of restoration. So these rights that we haven't even conceived of, that have existed from time immemorial, are included in this law of restoration. Now, when you read this, you notice there's two categories. These first 23 have to do with individual rights. The next 10 or so have to do with group or national rights of the people. Okay? So let's read this last one.
These unalienable and inalienable rights are not the only ones protected under the law of restoration. Rights not expressed here, yet still inherent, shall be as inviolable as the ones delineated. The strength of the people is in knowing their rights. It is incumbent on this provincial government to assure that all Moorish nationals within our dominions have been given erudition on these rights and how to live by them. May Allodium Moorish Pradium Ante Colorado be a beacon of light for the restoration of the Moorish Empire.
Okay. Now, let's go through this a little bit, because this expands the scope dramatically. These unalienable and inalienable rights are not the only ones protected under the law of restoration. Rights not expressed here, yet still inherent, shall be inviolable. Inviolable means they cannot be touched, they can't be altered, they cannot be destroyed. They're inviolable. It's like nothing you do can take those rights away.
Just like parental rights, they do it all the time, take the parental rights away.
But there's, remember, capitulations.
Yep.
The strength of the people is in knowing their rights. You see, it is incumbent on this provincial government to assure that all Moorish nationals within our dominions have been given erudition on these rights and how to live by them. Incumbent means it's an obligation, it's a duty, it's the necessary steps in order to carry out one's status and one's position. Okay, so it's incumbent on the state to provide and give erudition. That means learning, scholarship. That means for full scope of understanding in relationship to these rights, so that you can live freely knowing that you have these rights and they're protected by your state. And then, may Allodium Moorish Pradium Ante Colorado be a beacon of light for the restoration of the Moorish Empire. Now, a beacon you can think of as like a lighthouse. But a beacon is a warning signal for imminent danger, a warning signal for the onslaught of an enemy, a warning for something that could possibly happen. Okay? So a beacon of light to light the path, so that people don't get into danger by stepping off the path and putting themselves in the jurisdictional clutches of those that want them back. Okay? Now, a beacon of light for the restoration of the Moorish Empire. Now, in our letterhead, what you'll see is our byline in our letterhead says a provincial state government under the existing and pre-existing sovereignty of the Moroccan Empire. Okay, that's a statement of claim of the restoration of the Moroccan Empire. The Moroccan Empire is not dead.
Nope.
in 1956, Morocco converted its status to a kingdom. Now, a kingdom is less than an empire.
Yep.
The Sultan changed his status to king. So he's not the king of the empire. And in the process of doing that, he threw all of the Moors under the bus. It's unfortunate, but that is what happened. So the Moors have to stand up and begin to claim their statehood so that they can begin to rebuild the Moorish Empire. And the Moorish Empire is wherever Moors are, the melanin-rich people all over the world. You see, but we're not trying to deal with the whole world.
Right.
That would be ludicrous.
Right now, we're just trying to get this little chunk of land
This
taken
little
care
chunk
of.
right here.
Exactly. So I wanted to, this is where we're going to stop in terms of the law of restoration. I want to get back to this real quick to close it out. For those of you that are watching and you're listening and studying, begin to check the boxes. The Constitution is key, and it's necessary for statehood. If you don't have a constitution, you don't have a state. If you don't have the three branches of government delineated, if you don't have elections delineated, when that happens, how it happens, what the qualifications for the various offices are, if you don't have election dates delineated, a date for inauguration, that's what you need. Check the boxes. A seal, flag, constitution, oath of allegiance, so that the people who are Moors with you, an oath of allegiance is to renounce the allegiance and to choose between the entire submission to the laws of the Moroccan Empire via your Moorish state. And then elections and a public inauguration that you put on your website so everybody can see, so the entire world knows that you have a state and you have elected officials. Now, with the Constitution, our Constitution is an ever-growing organic document.
Yep.
It's not static. We've done constitutional conventions at least 6 times, and there'll be more because we're learning more. We're incorporating what we're learning into it as best we can. And it doesn't take a lot. The more you learn, you learn that the less you have to do.
Yep.
And the more valuable your doing becomes. So with that, I just want to say, I want all of you to know that I thank you for watching this video. Thank you for being here in this class. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to understand and grasp some of these principles. And we're going to be continuing with this next week. And it will be on video. It'll be on YouTube. You'll see this. And I don't have to talk about likes and all that stuff. But we don't do that. But thank you very much. Peace. Islam.